This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
I'm Shini Somara, finding out how city street lighting is affecting astronomy, as well as the well-being of its residents, and how smart city technology can help.
And I'm Emma Keeling with new evidence that shows exercising more doesn't mean you'll lose more weight. We've all done it. I know I have. You want to lose weight, so you go on a diet, but you fail to cut enough calories, so you head to the gym for hours, hoping that will shed the pounds, which doesn't always work. But there's some good news. New research shows that's just not how the body works. Professor Herman Pontzer is an evolutionary anthropologist. His new book, Burn, contains 10 years of groundbreaking research that proves doing more exercise doesn't burn more calories.
No matter the lifestyle, our bodies are burning the same number of calories, and that has big implications for how things like diet, exercise, obesity, disease, how those all play out in our lives here in the West.
A calorie is a unit of energy, but due to a strange quirk in the history of nutritional science, we usually say calories when we actually mean kilocalories or 1,000 calories. That's the same amount of energy needed to heat 1 litre of water by 1 degree Celsius. In terms of food, one of these chocolate-based sweets contains around 4 kilocalories. Walking 1.6 kilometres burns around 50 kilocalories, or 12 of these. For an average man's body just to function, he needs to eat 3,000 kilocalories a day. For a woman, it's 2,300. Simply put, any energy we take in above these levels, the body stores, and it stores it in the form of fat. But what's tipping the scales in the West is the type of food we're eating.
The ultra-processed, sort of industrialized foods that we're surrounded with push us to overeat. We know how they affect our brain. They light up our reward systems in a way that natural foods never can. These are foods that our brains are not evolved to have ever encountered, and they're literally engineered in a lab and focus group tested to be overconsumed. And so we shouldn't maybe be surprised when that's exactly what people do, they overconsume them. So ultra-processed foods seem to be really a big problem. And they are over half the calories we eat in the industrialized world.
Processed foods includes anything that changes a food's original form, such as cheese or bread. Ultra-processed food has been significantly changed with salt, sugar, fat, additives and preservatives, and includes soft drinks, pizza and chips. The professor knew how many calories a typical person from the West burned a day, but he didn't know how that compared to a hunter-gatherer. So why did you choose to focus your research on the Hadza people in Tanzania?
I study human evolution, and for 2.5 million years of our evolution, we are all hunting and gathering. And so if you want to understand the evolutionary forces and lifestyles that sort of shaped our bodies, then that's the lifestyle that you want to understand. The Hadza people are one of the few communities left on the planet that still hold on to those hunting and gathering traditions. They're as modern as you and me in terms of their bodies, but they hold on to those old traditions, and so they're a great chance to look into what that lifestyle does to our bodies.
Professor Pontzer is looking to see how lifestyle impacts our total energy expenditure. That is all the kilocalories an individual burns in a day, and it can be broken down into the following. The first and largest section is our basal metabolism or basal metabolic rate. This includes all the chemical processes in the body that require energy, such as repairing cells or breathing. It's unique for everyone, but the statistical average is slightly higher in men. We also use kilocalories to consume kilocalories, as energy is required to break down food. Finally, physical exercise brings us to the total energy expenditure for an individual. In the case of the Hadza tribe, who have an extremely active lifestyle, Professor Pontzer's expectation was that the kilocalories required for physical exercise would be much greater, pushing higher the total energy expenditure. So how many calories do you need to survive as a hunter-gatherer?
Well, that was the big surprise, because we were so sure that they would burn tons of calories, more than we do here in the West, because they are incredibly physically active. They get more activity in a day than the typical American gets in a week. And so we were sure, the whole reason we went there was to see how many more calories a day they're burning than we are. And instead, we were shocked to learn that it's the same number of calories as you and me. So even though they're really physically active, they don't burn more calories every day.
The professor found the Hadza men were burning around 2,600 kilocalories and the women 1,900, which, according to the professor, is about the same as a Westerner with a desk job. And that is at odds with the accepted school of thought that sedentary lifestyles are what causes obesity.
This is the first study to measure energy expenditures in a hunting and gathering group. The reason nobody had done it before was that you need techniques that have only been developed the last sort of couple decades and hadn't ever been implemented in these kind of contexts.
To work out precisely how many calories a person uses in a day, the scientists measure how much carbon dioxide they release through breathing. This is because carbon dioxide is only produced by calories being burnt by the body. They can do this through clever biochemistry and mathematics using something called doubly labelled water. Doubly labelled water contains uncommon forms of the elements oxygen and hydrogen, known as isotopes. They have more neutrons in their atoms, giving them a greater mass and therefore traceable when leaving the body, using a method called mass spectrometry. A person is given doubly labelled water containing isotopes oxygen-18 and hydrogen-2. Over time, hydrogen and oxygen exit the body as water through sweating and bodily functions. Additional oxygen is also lost through carbon dioxide during breathing. Urine is regularly collected and measured to see how much oxygen-18 and hydrogen-2 has been lost over time. When plotted on a graph, oxygen is lost more rapidly, with a steeper slope, due to more oxygen being released in carbon dioxide when breathing. The slope of hydrogen-2 loss against oxygen-18 loss can be compared and the difference calculated to measure how much carbon dioxide has been excreted by the body. This figure can then be inserted into a formula to accurately work out how many calories were expended. This is called indirect calorimetry.
So lifestyle doesn't seem to be a big factor, right? People who are active or less active have the same energy expenditures on average. But of course, around that average, there's a lot of variation. We don't have a great understanding yet of all of the sort of genetic components and maybe early life experiences that affect your body's metabolic rate, what your body sets its metabolic rate to, the thermostat. And so that's an exciting area for new research. What we do know is that if you have a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism, that doesn't seem to affect your risk of gaining or losing weight.
The findings were tested further in South America, this time on children of the Shua tribe.
If you want to understand how industrialization and market integration, how that has affected our bodies, you want to catch a population that's catch them in action, catch them in the process of moving from rural, remote, traditional lifestyles into more urban lifestyles. Sam Urlacher led this study with the Shuar children in Ecuador. And if you compare energy expenditure, activity, body fat, diet, for kids that are really remote and still have a very traditional lifestyle, the kids who are in these more urban lifestyles, it's the same population, just the lifestyles changed. What you see is that the energy expenditures are still the same. And yet the kids near the cities are gaining a bit more fat. They're not overweight or obese sort of yet. I mean, they're kind of heading that direction as a society. And it has everything to do with diet and not energy expenditure, because we've measured both and we know it's the diet.
You also focused on children between the ages of 4 and 12. Why is that?
The focus on children, I think, is important because childhood obesity is beginning to be a bigger and bigger issue. And we need to understand that now so we can fix the problem as quickly as we can. The other issue is that once we get to be adults and our bodies are kind of set at our adult weight and our adult composition, I think a lot of us know from experience that's a very hard thing to change.
Adding to the list of discoveries was how much the body adapts and slows down calorie burning when a person exercises above a certain level.
So if you spend energy on physical activity, if your muscles are burning the energy in exercise, then your body responds by taking energy away from other tasks. And that's how we think you sort of balance the books and keep your energy budget in check.
This was shown in 2016 when he joined with a group of researchers to study extreme marathon runners.
If I look at active people versus inactive people, I'll see the same expenditures after the body adjusts. And we wanted to know how far can you push it, right? Because everybody knows that surely if you run a marathon, then at least on that day, you're burning more calories. And what if you ran a marathon every day for 5 months? And so we actually found people who were doing this. We were invited to measure energy expenditures for people who ran from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. over the course of 5 months. Absolutely incredible. And what we saw was that, of course, if you're doing that, your body can't adjust to that entirely. It tries, so we see some metabolic adjustment. They're burning more calories at the beginning of that transcontinental race than they are at the end. So the question becomes, how come you can't keep up that 4,000 calories a day? How come you can't keep it up forever? And the answer seems to be that there's a sort of sliding scale, that you can burn tons of calories for a day or two, and then if you want to go for a month, well, then that ceiling's a bit lower for a month, and in 2 months, well, the ceiling's lower still. And so you can imagine that sort of the longer you go, the lower that metabolic ceiling is, right? And then if you extend it into, well, what about daily life? What about forever? What about years and years and years? And that metabolic ceiling is where all of us are living under day to day, including groups like the Hadza, right? So the marathon runners are kind of the exception that proves the rule. You can push it for a while, but daily life, you can't.
You may be watching this and thinking, well, I may as well ditch the running if I'm not going to lose any weight. But if you just diet and don't exercise, you could be sacrificing the rest of your body's health.
Exercise is so good. It's good for your brain, your heart, your immune system, and actually all that metabolic adjustment that keeps your energy expenditure in check, that's really good for you too. So exercise has a role there as well. I think the bigger danger is that if you tell people that they'll lose weight with exercise and they don't, because on average people don't lose weight with exercise, then they'll assume something's wrong, or they're doing it wrong, or it's not working for them, and they stop.
Professor Pontzer certainly isn't stopping. These revelations have opened up new research pathways.
Once we discovered that the body is sort of more interesting and sophisticated and dynamic than we suspected, then we had to figure out how it's doing all that and what the implications are. So the last few years, we've been figuring out exactly what switches get turned off, or at least dialed down, in response to activity. And so we've got projects going on right now trying to look at all that and sort of connect all the dots.
But while he's busy doing that, we all need to watch what we eat, or the obesity epidemic and therefore chronic health issues will only get worse.
I think that we have to tell people that obesity is a diet problem. I think the messaging starts first, and then we go and we work to get those messages out into the communities that need to hear it, in useful ways. It's a diet problem and not an exercise problem.
You can see more of Razor on our YouTube channel. Search for Razor Science Show and it will take you straight there. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN, see the difference.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business. only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
For billions of years, all life has relied on Earth's predictable rhythm of night and day. Humans have radically disrupted this cycle by artificially lighting up the night sky. The night skies above cities are hundreds, if not thousands of times brighter than 200 years ago. But we've all become accustomed to the safety and improved visibility that night street lighting brings. But have we ever stopped to ask, is all of this lighting just too much?
The ability to look down on the Earth at night with remote sensing from satellites is just a game changer in terms of our understanding of this problem.
Tucson, Arizona is famed for its dark skies. After sunset, the clear, arid conditions attract astronomers from across the United States. And its 3 observatories are an important part of the economy. So when local government decided to upgrade their street lighting, they were sure to call upon Dr. John Barantine, an astronomer whose many accomplishments include having an asteroid named after him.
They wanted to be sure that that project would not result in any damage to the astronomy enterprise. They did not want to increase the amount of the sky glow phenomenon, the scattered light in the night sky.
But for Dr. Barantine and his colleagues at the International Dark Sky Association, this is only one piece of a larger problem of light pollution.
When we get out of the atmosphere and look back at the Earth, that we can see the large-scale distribution of that light. And it really gives us a global picture. There's almost no part of the world that isn't affected by it in one way or another, and that the scale and scope of it, combined with what we know from laboratory and field research, is really what's telling us about the significance of it as an environmental problem. There's some indication that that daily rhythm of light and dark was already imprinted on the DNA of some of the earliest single-celled organisms that existed on Earth. When we disrupt that, we create all kinds of problems for wildlife, from disrupting their circadian rhythms to changing the way that they find mates, forage for food, the way they move about at night on the surface of the Earth. And that artificial light we're putting into the environment is very attractive to them. Like the old cliche about a moth being drawn to a flame, it can be fatal to them.
The team at Dark Sky Institute saw an opportunity to make a local difference by helping Tucson to create smarter, more responsive street lighting.
So the problem that we're trying to solve is the excess amount of artificial light at night that is being emitted into our nighttime environment. And that is light that's caused by humans in one way or another. But we think we can mitigate the harm while allowing for the benefits, and ultimately that is our aim.
So how did you go about that?
So they used a combination of some of the best available LED technology, as well as this smart city approach, or the smart lighting, to actively control that light that can vary characteristics such as the brightness of that light, the duration of the night, in which the light is operated. We can change characteristics like its color. So early on in the evening, when you have a lot more people outside, there's more traffic on the roads, we know that there's some benefit to having colors that more resemble daylight. But later in the night, when there isn't as much traffic, there's not as much justification for that. And that those daylight kind of colors are what we know to be harmful, especially to biology.
The majority of outdoor lighting is wasted, reflecting off surfaces and spilling over into the night sky. This lost light refracts in the atmosphere, creating what's known as sky glow. Smart lighting aims to address these issues by shielding and targeting lights to point just where light is needed, reducing the output and dimming lights after a certain time, or changing the light to longer wavelengths, such as yellow or red, that are less visible to wildlife. With the new controllable streetlights, Dr. Barantine was finally able to address a fundamental question.
In a typical city, how much of the city's light emissions is represented by street lighting? And there was so much guesswork to that simply because it was hard to design an experiment that could get you that answer.
He approached the city with an extraordinary plan to simultaneously measure the light in Tucson from the ground and from space.
We came up with this idea of approaching the city and asking them if they would be willing to make deliberate but temporary changes to the lighting on just a few nights, and to do it at midnight, so it was an hour when there wouldn't be very much traffic on the streets and there would be very little impact to residents. To time it also with the time when the satellite flies over, which is around 1 a.m. local time. So the change would be made, and then the satellite would fly over shortly thereafter, and we would make the measurement simultaneously from orbit and from the ground.
Amazingly, the city agreed, in no small part because their own engineers were interested in the results.
From their perspective, it was a valuable test in that not only did it give us useful scientific data, but it gave them very useful engineering data about how the control system was performing.
Over 10 nights, the brightness of settings for about 14,000 of the city's 19,500 streetlights were adjusted, dimming them down to 30% on some nights and brightening them up to 100% on others. Dr. Barantine started by taking measurements of the brightness of the sky.
We typically measure the zenith, which is the point at which we would call the top of the sky.
I'm just going to fire off a couple of readings here.
We have a number of different kinds of ways of sensing that light, and they vary from, for example, calibrated cameras, just plain digital photographic cameras that are calibrated for the purpose of making these very sensitive measurements. And we use fisheye lenses so that we can view the entire sky in one frame. We also have some very simple electronic devices that can be handheld. This is an example of one here that's called a sky quality meter, that we literally just point at the sky and press a button, and within a few seconds we have a reading on the display in a calibrated unit that gives us a real valid scientific measurements.
At the same time, images were taken from space using a specialist satellite that can detect electromagnetic radiation in the spectral window equivalent to visible light.
It's only been in about the last 10 years or so that we have had really cutting-edge technology in space that lets us see even very faint artificial lights on the night side of the Earth. And it really gives us a global picture. It's one thing for us to be in a particular location on Earth and look up at the night sky, but it's only when we get out of the atmosphere and look back at the Earth that we can see the large-scale distribution of that light, and we can measure it in terms of quantity.
The data collected from orbit and the ground was then compared to readings taken on nights when the streetlights were not adjusted. The results confirmed that the smart lighting was a success.
Our research showed a measurable decrease in the amount of light in the night sky over the city that was consistent with expectations, so that we know that the lighting design produced approximately the effect that we wanted.
As well as reducing the amount of light pollution, the smart lighting had environmental benefits and financial benefits for the City Council.
The energy cost is lower, the carbon emission cost is lower, etc. The astronomers seem to be happy with it. The city officials calculated that over the expected roughly 20-year lifetime of our new street lighting system, that the smart controls will not only pay for themselves, but probably will save the city on the order of between $1 million and $2 million in operating costs.
But the data wasn't entirely what they expected. To their surprise, street lighting was a smaller part of the overall picture than originally thought.
We think that the total emission represented by our street lighting system is probably less than 20%, and it may be closer to 10 to 15%. And that really then changes our approach to dealing with the remainder, which we think are predominantly private sources of lighting, lighting on the exteriors of homes and businesses, car parks, illuminated signs, similar kinds of lighting.
The results are amazing, but with lights being dimmed at night, were there any concerns from residents about safety?
We don't want people to feel that something has been taken away from them. We don't want them to feel unsafe. Rather, we want to be sure that those lighting systems are operated such that they put the right amount of light in the right places and times when people are present and they need it. A lot of people are very worried about their transit between places at night, their safety, especially women. I think those fears are genuine. I think we should listen to people who say that they're afraid and respond appropriately. And in some cases, that means that we should use light. We should use it in a way that creates genuine safety and not merely the perception of safety. Those are different things.
So, as well as implementing smart lighting technology, is there anything else we can do to address other sources of light pollution?
I think everyone has a part to play if they choose to do so. And obviously we've been talking about what cities can do and the type of lighting that's typically most significant and under the control of a city is its public lighting, like its street lighting. And so through good public policy, adequate technical information, educating the city officials and the engineers who have to make the decisions, we can help the cities play their part in this. But everybody, wherever they live, can do something useful to help solve this problem. And in the case of typical homeowners, it's as simple as looking at the lighting on the exterior of your home and asking questions like, is that lighting useful? Is it necessary? If it's not, can it be turned off?
So we can all do something to help reduce the amount of light pollution, not only benefiting wildlife and the environment, but also ourselves.
I think we're missing a connection that humans have had to the cosmos for our entire length of time on this planet. Long before there was written history or language or any of these things that we could have used to try to express what that is. And it's a connection that makes us question how we got here, why we're here. For some people, it's a sort of communion with the divine. For other people, it's the sort of a peak of intellectual pursuit. And to think that there was a time until very recently when everybody had access to this, absolutely everybody. And that only in the last several decades or maybe a century or so, we have lost that connection that was once so immediate and that we all had, I think is a really striking indicator of how much we have changed the planet itself in such a short period of time.
This is a very precarious spot, but it's a very privileged spot because I am going to release about 3,000 of these little glass eels. And we've given them a lift up the hill by about, or up the stream I should say, by about 12 miles. And it means that they don't have to go through all those other barriers. So it's just a little less sort of hard work that they have to do. So we'll just tip a few in here and let them go. Woo, look at them all, amazing. There we go. And they're off. Oh, amazing. Good luck. Go forth, multiply.